I'm like, I'm sorry, what did I do wrong? Because he didn't do anything wrong. I go, why does he want to talk to me? He goes, because he wants to talk to you. He said, cut it out. He said, you'll love him. And from the next part of it, I don't talk about because I made a promise. I was offered or asked to do something, and it seemed pretty cool. So I started doing it, and that turned into a point of when he kind of offered me a job, as I put it. I had to call my dad, who had bought a truck for me, semi. And Elvis told me, he goes, he's not going to believe you. I go, well, sure he is, my dad's. He's not going to believe me. I called my dad. He didn't believe me. Thought I was drinking, doing drugs, all kinds of shit. And the next day Elvis goes, well, I go, you're right, he didn't believe me. And he kind of chuckled. He had a grin and smile about him. And he goes, look, I'll give them a call and explain. I go, well, why are you going to do that? They never talked to you on the phone before. They're going to think you're full of shit. And that kind of that changed my whole life. So, going from driving a truck, which he was a truck driver, and actually made a comment one time about it, maybe I should have just said driving a truck wouldn't be so goddamn complicated. But he was very, very, just like the guy you'd sit at the truck stop across having a cup of coffee with. Very down to earth. Nothing like I thought, I never thought what he'd be like, but, and I was amazed at the way, but, you know, one rule, you don't work for me, you work for the people outside those gates. That's who pays us. I don't pay you, they pay you. You disrespect them one time, you're out the door. End of subject. There's no middle room.
Those were the fans?
Yeah.
He was talking about?
Yeah, yeah. He loved you. You know Michael, he loved his fans. But you did not disrespect them.
Ever?
No, it was yes ma'am, no ma'am. Even my mom told me when I ended up, excuse me, coming back home, she goes, where did you pick up manners so quick? I go, what do you mean? She said, you never called me ma'am before. I go, well, I kind of had a crash course. She goes, I like it. She said, you're very respectful. I said, well, somebody showed me the light. But I never talked about it. I never did, because he told me, he says, if you tell people, he goes, it's going to make your life hell. He says, believe me. And you don't realize it till later on. So, I never really told anybody about it.
So why are you telling us now?
Because he asked me.
And you mentioned Vester had meant, you had said Vester, his uncle. Whose uncle?
Elvis. Uncle Vester.
Okay, Uncle Vester.
Yeah.
John, tell us who you are and where we're at.
Who I am?
Who you are, because we didn't start with that. Let's.
Oh, my name's John Griffin. We're in Las Vegas. Oh.
Let's take a breath. All right. Okay.
This is like when I got arrested.
Yes. Okay.
You're doing great.
Now give us 2 seconds of silence and then tell us who you are and where we're at.
Are we ready?
No. We're going to clap, and then 2 seconds after the clap. Okay? Ready?
Hi, my name's John Griffin. Born in Canada. We are in Las Vegas, Nevada.
How did you meet Michael?
Oh, what a story. After Elvis, and I went back from Memphis to Chicago, I had bumped into a guy named Johnny Spence, who was like, he was an ETA, Elvis tribute artist. Actually really good. He was actually the grandfather of all these guys. He got a hold of me and asked me if I'd come work for him because he needed help. Now, he had no clue that I had worked for Elvis, but we had bumped into each other at truck stops and what have you. And He liked the idea that I could drive for 2 hours, or I could drive for 2 days without sleep. So there was a whole thing with him, production, bodyguard. Yeah, I took care of him, went up the whole ladder, and I started a show called Shadow of a King. 1980, 79, something like that. And online, I have Shadow of a King Productions on Facebook. And I took, you know, converse, I have ETAs all over the world contacting me. And one night I get this message from this lady, Bonnie, I can't remember her last name. But she's telling me, goes, do you know who Michael Presley is? I go, no. I'm texting, typing all this. Well, they're using your logo and saying that you do their production and that, and I'm like, no, that's not right. I don't know what you're talking about. She gets all up into, well, you know, he did this and he did that, and I'm like, lady, why are you bothering me? I don't know this person. And she goes, well, you need to look him up and like that. So obviously I'm like, well, if somebody's lying, I want to know about this. So I start doing the thing on Facebook and I track down a page, Michael Presley. Now I'm not very internet smart or savvy, okay? I never realized that when you go from one page to another, your logo still stays up in the left-hand side. I go to this page, Michael's page, fan page, and here's my logo, and I'm like, son of a bitch. And tracked down through that, and this guy, Jason Gerhardt, was the handler of the page, or whatever you guys call it, administrator. Dig around, get his phone number, contact him, or actually I think I messaged him first, but we ended up talking on the phone later. And I went off on this poor kid. How could you? I'm gonna fuck you. And we get talking, and all of a sudden, he tells me about Michael, Elvis's son. And I don't know, it just made me sit there and go, wait a minute. Now, being around Graceland and inside the walls, there was always the, how can I say it? Not the hint, the rumor of about 70 kids that Elvis had. And I'm like, well, actually that's not very much for somebody like him. Because he was pretty. I mean, I even told him one time, I said, God damn, you're pretty. And he kind of grinned, he go, I don't go that way. I go, well, I don't either, but, you know. I go, you are. His eyes were just unbelievable. And he had a grin on him that was just, I'd never seen before. And I'd seen his movies growing up. You know, we'd gone to the movie theater, you know, blue, white, all of them and that. And, but I ripped into this guy, Jason, until I talked to my son. He's like, Dad, no, that follows you around. And he told me how to check it, and I go, oh God, now I really feel like a dick. So I got back in touch with him again, and he's like, look, you've got to talk with Michael, and you've got to meet Michael. And so it was through Jason that the contact was made with Michael Presley. And at the time, my wife and I were going through a spiritual rebirth. I had a spiritual advisor. And this guy Lance and I would talk about God and Scripture. And I never read the Bible, so he would, you know, what about this? What about that? And the first time that Jason set up the phone call, Lance was at home with me on the damn Elvis booth, of all places. And we talked for about 3 hours, I believe. It was just, before you knew, it was like 3 hours later, the way the conversation went. But the biblical thing to me was that I keep looking at Lance and I go, do you believe that? And at the end, Michael, you know, this was great talk, guys, and that, and he goes, gentlemen, let's all say a prayer. And he sat there on the phone and repeated the last verse stuff that Lance and I talked about in the car together that afternoon. And there's no way in hell he knew what we talked about. None whatsoever. But to a T. And after it hung up, Lance looked at me and he goes, "You need more proof?" I go, he said, "Well, that's how solid God is." He goes, "There you are. Do you believe or not? You got the faith." Then after that, one thing after another happened like that. There'd be times I'd look up, I go, "Lord, what am I supposed to do with this?" Next thing I know, Michael calls me. "What are you doing? How are you?" I'm like, "I was just thinking about you." And vice versa. And there's a point to where you either got to believe or you don't believe. But what I knew from being around his dad, and Michael and I never really got seriously talking about that till later on in our relationship. But the man knew more about what went on than anybody that I had met that was not behind the walls, meaning the family and what have you.
So let me make a point here. So when you contacted Jason, you told him, and you knew then that Jason and I did not use your logo.
No.
Or anything to do with
No, it was my stupidity.
Shadow of a King.
But this lady kept pushing it. I mean, she kept pushing to where I finally blocked her. I said, "Look, you're nuts. You have no idea what you're talking about." "Well, he did this and he did that." And I go, "Why do you care? Did you date this man or something? Did he kick you out or break up with you? You sound like a pissed off ex-wife." And come to find out, she tried it again and again at different names. But my kid, who's very genius at internet, he goes, "Here, let me show you how to find this." And there you go. And I go, "That's it." So set up a routine. Caught her many, many times. And I told Jason about it. I even reported his Facebook.